So, I get lots of questions about processed food, so I wanted to talk about it because it's it's, it's really a major health concern. So, and there's a lot of information tonight. What I'll do is when I'm done, I'll have Tanya send you my notes too, so you have a copy of everything, so you can go a deeper dive if you want. Because I really want you to understand kind of the health consequences of processed foods, because the reality of it is they're everywhere now. Our American diet is mostly composed of processed food. And it's really important to understand the health impacts of these different items. So the first thing is to first define, well, what is a processed food? And so the simple term is really a food item that anything's been done to it to alter how it is from its natural environment. So, you can pick an apple and eat an apple off a tree. That's not considered processed. But you can buy frozen apple or apple canned apples or bottled apple, and that is considered processed. But when you look at this table I'm showing you of unprocessed to ultra processed, just think of basically as you go from left to right, your health it becomes a bigger impact in your health and negative impact, meaning the ultra processed food items are really what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And those are the things that comes in bags, boxes, and barcodes. So I always say that. So, when we talk about food items, I I don't think I'm a big conspiracy person, but one thing that we are seeing more of in the food industry is very similar patterns to the tobacco industry, meaning they're doing things and behaviors in supporting their ultra processed foods that we have seen for the last 20, 30 years, 50 years with the tobacco industry. So I don't think it's necessarily that they're wanting to harm us, but they are trying to sell their products and they're trying to make their products something we want to buy. So that's done through ultra processing. And so this includes your cakes, your sugary cereals, your frozen meals, your sodas. All these things are going to contain very high levels of sugars, fat, and salt, and really a slew of artificial other ingredients. Now, tonight, I'm talking about ultra processed foods, and specifically, I'm going to focus in on uh, oils or seed oils. Now, that's only one component of ultra processed. So there's a lot of other things in an ultra processed food that also is detrimental to your health. But we know that the seed oils are really, really bad for our health. So we're gonna do a deeper dive into that. So, well, what are the health concerns of processed foods? Well, first of all, they are nutrient deficient. And what I mean by that is, as they're processed, they're stripped of their fiber, other vitamins and micronutrients and minerals that are really part of the whole product. And so they really just leave a product that's very calorie dense but nutrient poor. Now, in addition to that, there's tons of sugar, salt, and fat added to these things. So many of the processed foods are really designed to be hyper palatable. And this really means that it triggers your brain's reward system really much more intense than natural food would. And this is going to lead to eating and really addiction. So we do see food addiction. And so it's really this combination of the high sugar, fat, and salt that's really encourages to overeat, but it also contributes to the long-term health problems like obesity and diabetes. Now, processed foods are often very calorie dense, but very low in fiber or protein and other nutrients that really that's what promotes satiety, meaning that we feel that we are full. So this leads to overeating. It's going to make it easier for us to consume far more calories than our body really needs. In addition, they promote chronic inflammation. And we know that the inflammation or chronic inflammation is kind of the root of basically all known pathologies that we don't want to have. So many of these processed foods are linked to inflammation and chronic disease. So your additives such as your artificial ingredients, your excess sugar are really strong or significant contributors to inflammation. And this really sets the stage for heart disease, diabetes, and autoimmune conditions. So let's talk a little bit about the fats. So out of everything I'm going to talk about tonight, this is probably the one slide I want you to really pay attention to, because the saturated fats have been given a bad rap. We really, you know, there's been a big push from society to avoid saturated fats, and that's probably not the right thing. We're learning that saturated fats are actually uh, an important part of the biological process. Just like cholesterol is given a bad name, but cholesterol is required for every cell in the body. And so saturated fats, we really shied away from them, and you're starting to see a swing back that it's okay to consume saturated fats. In fact, it's healthy to consume those. But when we talk about fats, they're broken basically down into saturated and unsaturated. So your saturated are your normal, butter, creams, things like that. They aren't really processed much. There is a processing, but they're not ultra processed. But now your unsaturated are broken down into mono unsaturated and polyunsaturated. And they call them PUFAs, or polyunsaturated fatty acids. And those are the ones you need to really pay attention to, because those are the ones that are really detrimental to your health. And unfortunately, they're the ones that are the most common in all the ultra processed foods. So if you look here, they break them out by, they call them the hateful eight. So your corn oil, your canola oil, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, rice bran, vegetable oil. Those things are all bad oils. And I'm going to go into a kind of a deeper dive as to why that is. But the first thing to understand is that these are not natural things. They're heavily processed oils, and so when you look at your soybean or your sunflower canola oil, they're 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 very common in any kitchen in the United States, and they're very common in any industrial food production. Now, what's important to understand is really there's a mechanical and a chemical processes that are involved to really make these oils, and it involves a lot of heat, a lot of chemical solvents, and then bleaching and deodorization, and really trying to promote shelf stability and palatability. So these things are very, very heavily processed. And so historically, like I said, we used to consume fats primarily from animal sources like butter and lard and tallow, and maybe plant-based such as olive oil or coconut oil. But there's been this past a massive shift towards the consumption of seed oils, and this has really been driven by the agricultural advancements and cost-effective kind of food production. And now these oils really are a staple in the processed food, and they're in everything we eat. And so it's important to understand what the impact they are having. So what are the risks of these seed oils? Well, one of the things we always talk about, and you may have heard, we want omega-3 fatty acids. Those are good ones. But then there's the omega-6 fatty acid. These are the bad ones. And these are very, very, very high in seed oils. So you're getting this omega-6 fatty acid. This really promotes a lot of inflammation. In addition, seed oils are prone to oxidation, which means they create toxins, specifically when you add heat to them. So a lot of these oils are used for cooking. And by adding heat, we're really oxidizing the oil, and it creates what's called a free radical, which then just runs rampant and damages our cells throughout our body and promotes chronic inflammation and your chronic diseases, such as cancer and heart disease. And that's one of the reasons they're linked to these chronic diseases, because of these free radicals, the omega-6, that these are really having a negative impact on your overall health. And then they're very disruptive to your gut health. It's been found that they increase the permeability of your gut, which is leaky gut syndrome. That's also is an autoimmune, causes an inflammatory response, and really triggers a lot of autoimmune problems. So there's a lot of health consequences when we consume seed oils, and we're consuming tons of seed oil through ultra processed food. So the big thing is, as I said, there's the saturated, the mono unsaturated, and the polyunsaturated. And what happens is we all need oxygen to live, but oxygen in excess is also detrimental to our health. And what happens is oxygen will attack certain bonds in these fatty acids and create toxins. And the more of these certain bonds there are, the more toxins it creates. And that's what you see here is with polyunsaturated, they have more of these bonds that oxygen can link into and cause more toxins. And so the PUFAs or the polyunsaturated fatty acids, depending on which type of oil it is can generate a whole bunch of toxin in our body. And then your body has to do things to try to alleviate that. And when that system gets overran, that's when you have sickness and illness, such as diabetes, cancer, just a host of medical problems. So how does processed foods infect us? Well, obviously they contribute to the obesity epidemic. Because they're low nutritional value, you're going to gain weight. There's little fiber, there's no protein or little protein. So all these things that tell us when we're full are been removed. So we're going to eat a lot more. And then they're also very calorie dense, so your sugary drinks, your snack foods, those types of things cause you to eat more, and they're also very high in calories. So it's really just a vicious circle. In addition, they contribute to type 2 diabetes. And this is really, first it's through the glucose spike. So when you eat these sugars cause a rapid spike in your blood sugar. This is going to cause your pancreas to produce insulin. And over time, you develop insulin resistance, and they'll result in basically in type 2 diabetes. And then the final one is metabolic syndrome. This is kind of a wastebasket term we use, but because it leads to a multitude of different illnesses. But the reality of it is when we label someone with a metabolic syndrome, it's really a cluster of conditions that include high blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess body fat, and abnormal cholesterol, triglyceride levels. And these, if you have these kind of qualifications, it's going to really significantly increase your risk of a multitude of things, of heart disease, strokes, diabetes, and all the bad things we don't want. Now, processed foods and the cardiovascular health. Well, we've all probably heard of trans fats. There's been a push throughout the world actually to reduce trans fats, and in other countries, maybe the United States is a bit slow on this one because some of the trans fats that are perfectly acceptable to consume in the United States are banned in other countries, meaning that you can no longer use them. So we know that trans fats are bad and they contribute to heart disease. And what the trans fat is really is just a vegetable oil that's been hydrogenated, meaning they add hydrogen to it to make it go from a liquid to a solid so that it's a solid at room temperature. In addition, though, processed foods have tons of sodium in them, which is also a culprit in hypertension, which leads to risk of heart disease and stroke. So the sodium content can be very high. And then, like I already said, the seed oils they're very inflammatory. So they promote this inflammatory cascade that is detrimental to health because it's going to cause a whole bunch of problems. So, for example, that's how atherosclerosis in the heart, that's the buildup of the fatty deposits in the arteries that lead to stroke and heart attack. That's an inflammatory process. Now, is there a mental aspect to processed food? There sure is. And what I mean by that is we're learning now that we can actually treat depression and anxiety by removing processed foods. That processed foods or ultra processed foods are actually contributing to a cognitive decline. And so there's the mental health component of mental illness that these are contributing to. But in addition to that, there's the neurodegenerative component, such as your Alzheimer's or your dementia, that is also contributing to this. And again, that's through an inflammatory process. So, as I go through this stuff, the point is these ultra processed foods are extremely bad for us. They're extremely everywhere in our environment, and we consume way too much of it. And it's really leading to the health consequences that we're seeing in society. So, what is the impact on our gut? Well, the high sugar and low fiber is detrimental to our gut. It's going to lead to, like I already said, leaky gut syndrome and really an inflammatory response. So your immune system is just running rapid and not knowing what to do because of this. And so you have a ton of autoimmune problems associated with this. And so simply removing these ultra processed foods from your diet, is going to be very detrimental, or I mean, very beneficial to your overall health. And then also the cancer component. And again, these are also contributing to a cancer component. So the nitrites and nitrates, now those are things that have actually been listed as items to avoid. So those have been removed from a lot of food items. So these used to be found in a lot of your processed meats. And now these, you'll see they'll advertise them nitrate free. But also cooking, how we cook, we create these. So a lot of times, like barbecuing, things like that, cooking over a fire can actually add nitrates and nitrites to your food. So being aware of kind of the carcinogenic properties of processed foods is really, really important because they are contributing to this kind of cancer that we're living in. And then when we talk about the seed oils, the hateful eight are ones we should avoid, and then just add heat to those. We're making them a lot worse even, and those are often used in cooking. So when you look at those like canola oils and the sunflower oils, things like that, when we add heat to it, we're actually making them even more toxic too. So, well, how do you avoid the processed foods? Because they're everywhere. Again, first, start by reading the labels. Now, this is where my conspiracy theories maybe start to take hold because we're learning more and more. We promote and advocate to understand labels, but just when we think we're starting to get ahead of that, the food industry changes them. So, like here, I say, watch out for hidden sugars. Well, that's a challenge now because we've said in the past if it's an OS, like sucrose, ends in OSE, that's a sugar. Those are pretty easy to find. But they're renaming these sugars now, making it more difficult to understand that it's a sugar. In fact, there's over 260 names for sugar now that food labels are using in trying to kind of mask the sugar. And so it's becoming more and more difficult, but still it's a good place to start by reading the labels and seeing about the sugar content and also whether there's seed oils in it. And then at home, using alternate type of seed oils. So you don't want to use the seed oil, so use your olive oil, your coconut oil, or even butter or ghee. You know, don't be afraid to use just good old fashioned butter because it's not as detrimental as we've been told it is. It's actually very healthy for us, and compared to seed oils, is extremely healthy. And then really focusing on the whole nutrients of the food, meaning that emphasize fresh produce, whole grains and lean proteins. So really taking that more holistic path of whole foods, meaning less processing. Uh, I've heard it said it's the food is not bad. It's what is done to food that makes it bad. So the more we do things to food, the more likely we're doing things that make it less healthy for us. So the more processing, the more unhealthy it's going to be. Now, what are the benefits by reducing processed foods? Well, you're going to have better weight management. That's pretty straightforward. But you're going to have better heart health, and the one that people often neglect is the enhanced mental clarity and mood. Kind of that brain fog is often associated with processed or ultra processed foods. So by removing those from your diet, you're going to have a lot better mental clarity, and then reduction in the chronic diseases because of that inflammation reduction. Again, these are all very inflammatory, and this inflammation is really what's killing us. And so everything we can do to really uh, remove that inflammation is going to serve us well and really promote health. And again, I'm not talking about just the absence of disease. I mean true health, where you feel like you're thriving and feel excited and full of energy and things like that. So it's not enough just to be not have diabetes, but we don't want you to have diabetes, but we also want you to have a fulfilled life. And these items are taking away from that. So it's really important to really be very proactive and try to do what you can so that you're not having a diet rich in ultra processed foods. So how do we do that? Well, you got to have a plan. And where people fall apart is when they don't have a plan. They haven't had a plan for their dinner. They wait till they're really hungry and they're going to do what's the quickest and easiest. And that's going to be an ultra processed food. So meal prepping is very, very important by laying out what your meals are going to be. So you're strategic in knowing that on this day, this time, this is what I'm going to eat. Um, it can be a challenge to do that. And in today's fast paced world, we often reach for the quick answer, but that quick answer is often extremely detrimental to our long-term health. And so really meal prepping is extremely important. And then choosing whole foods, eating foods that have been uh, with the minimized amount of processing, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats. And then, like the last one says, is swapping out your seed oils for your healthy fats, using more of your olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oils, those types of things, in whenever you're cooking or preparing things. And then, in addition, in using less heat. Heat can be very detrimental whenever you're using any oils, and so the least amount of heat you can use, the better off you're going to be. So